Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up this valve here, which will supply pressure, which will allow the cargo to flow from the tank all the way up to this valve here. Okay. So again, thinking about pressure. Now I want that cargo to flow down through this section of pipeline next and get into here. This is my destination, is 3 center. So think about every valve that it hits. Every valve that it hits is going to affect the flow of cargo. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is open up this valve right here. Well, it needs a name. We need to give this a name because I need somebody else to open it. I'm not just going to go up there and go ahead and open up that valve. There's a couple of different things we can do. We can call it. First of all, it's green, so we can identify it by its color. Or we can identify it again by numbers, working from the bow to the stern. So that could be 1, 2, or 3. But I think you're going to find that if you leave it as the green valve, you're going to be okay. But the green valve isn't going to tell you enough. This is a specific valve, and it's called the header valve or the manifold valve. Either or. I don't care what you call it in that regard, as long as the team knows which one you're talking about. So try to stay consistency. So this would be the So this would be the green header. This would be the red header. That would be the yellow header. Cargo cannot flow. This should actually be the last valve you open up before we start to move cargo onto the ship. All right? This is the connection between the ship and the shore, so until you're ready to flow cargo, keep this valve closed. So we open this valve. Now pressure is allowed to go shooting down the pipeline until it bumps into another valve. It's going to bump into this valve. It's going to come down through here. It's going to bump into this valve. And then it's going to bump into that valve. So remember, as soon as you open up the street to allow it to go someplace, it's going to go there until it meets resistance. And those valves are going to be your resistance. So let's take a look at this valve. The first valve it's going to encounter is going to be this colored valve. And by opening this valve, you can see that it's going to actually cross-connect these two systems. It's going to allow this cargo to go into the red system. So this valve here, the color-coded that are striped like this, are called crossover valves. Now if we look along the piping system, you can see crossover valves in a variety of different places. Here's a crossover valve. There's a lot of crossover valves down there. There's some crossover valves down in the pump room. We won't look at the pump room. It's a scary place. We'll look at that later. So crossover valves. Now crossover valves are really good because they do one of two things. First of all, they add complexity to the system. You can see it becomes a little more complicated, but by being a little more complicated, it gives you more versatility. So there's the plus and the minus of crossovers. It increases your complexity of the system, but it gives you a lot more versatility. You can do more with the system. So by opening this valve, now I'm letting this cargo, let's say it's gasoline going down this pipeline, it allows the gasoline now to also interact with the red piping system, which may or may not be what you want. It's certainly not what you want if you have diesel fuel going into the red system and you open this up. Now you've got a mixture, you've got a contaminated cargo. So you have to be very, very careful with crossovers. You can see here, this is the leftovers from an idea that hasn't really worked that well. But a lot of times what happens with the crossover valves in industry is they actually put a padlock on them. Once you have those set up the way you want them to be set up, they don't want people messing around with them, so they'll put a lock and chain on there so people don't inadvertently open those valves and contaminate cargo. So backtracking, cargo coming through here, the green manifold valve bumps into, well, it's a crossover. We have to give it a name and we have to give it a location. So this could be, let's say, the red-green crossover at the manifold, or the manifold red-green crossover. I don't think you can get away with fewer words than that and really be able to describe what you want to have open. Sometimes we have to add words, but we try to nickel them down as much as we can. So I'm going to say the red-green manifold crossover, make sure that's closed. Cargo's now coming down through the pipeline here and it bumps into this valve. Now this valve is unique too because by opening this valve it allows the cargo to go back and down into the pump room. it blocks, it isolates the system from itself. In other words, I can't contaminate cargo here, but I may not want the cargo to go in that way. I'd rather have it go that way. So this valve, and you notice each system has one. There's a green one here, there's a red one here, and there's a yellow one here. Those are block valves. They block the cargo from going back in a different direction. Block valves. So we're going to find that we have other block valves someplace else. For example, this one here is a below deck red block valve. And I know it's a block valve because we have it color coded with a black middle in between here. So below decks will have that, they'll indicate that it's a block valve, and it's an important valve. I actually call those valves the gotcha valves. You know, you line the system up, you can't get cargo flowing. Inevitably what I'll say to you, and you come to me for advice, and I'm going to be very hesitant in giving you advice. I said, figure it out. You know, there's a reason. This is very, very mechanical. If something's not working, it's not some electronic thing going wrong. This is a mechanical issue that you should be able to resolve. And it's usually a block valve. And by not opening that valve, it's going to restrict the flow. All right, so let's get that straight. So that's a block valve. So that's the green above deck block valve. We're going to find that we have over here a green below deck block valve. So again, we have to add the word there to give it a location. I don't want it to go back there into the pump room. I want it to go down into number 3 center. So the next thing it's going to bump into is that valve right there. And oh look, there's a green one, there's a red one, and there's a yellow one. And by opening these valves, what happens to the cargo? It makes a difference. Let's come up here by the green one. Maybe come in at this angle over here. By opening this valve here, now the cargo is allowed to drop down. Can you see that? It drops down into the lower cargo main down through here. All right, so it's going from the main deck down to the lower deck, and we'll follow it through. So this valve has a unique name in that it's allowing it to drop. So this would be your green drop valve, red drop valve, yellow drop valve. Right? They're all common because under pressure while we're loading, it's going to drop into the lower system. Now, Rick, you're going to have a little bit of an interesting thing because we've got to look at this lower pipeline as it goes down through here. Why don't you put it on pause for a minute, and I'll bring the